Britain's broken border. Bold words. But will they actually do it? Let's be honest with each other. When a Muslim entrepreneur and major political donor stands up in Dover, on the very coastline that has become a symbol of national humiliation, and declares a national security emergency over immigration, you have to stop and ask yourself, how on earth did we get here? How did we reach the point where the most vocal defender of Britain's Christian heritage is a man who, by his very background, represents the diversity this country has long celebrated? That tension alone tells you everything about the mess our political establishment has created. But it also raises a harder question, one that the applause and the headlines won't answer for you. Is this real, or is this performance? Zia Yusuf, Reform UK's Shadow Home Secretary, delivered what many are calling a landmark speech this weekend in Dover. And whether you agree with every proposal or not, the core diagnosis he presented is hard to dismiss. He cited over 1 million net migrants annually under recent governments, knife crime tearing through our communities, small boats still crossing the channel in their hundreds, and in his words, churches being converted into mosques. 2 successive governments, Conservative and Labour alike, either unable or unwilling to grip the situation. These are the arguments he made. And they are ones that resonate with millions of people across this country. Yusuf didn't mince his words. He told the crowd, and the country watching online, that the social contract between the British government and the British people hasn't just been broken, it has been shattered. He spoke of sovereignty returning to Parliament, of leaving the European Convention on Human Rights, of a deportation command modelled on the American system, of 5 daily deportation flights, and of ending welfare access for those here illegally. Bold? Yes. Controversial? Absolutely. But here is the question nobody on the Reform cheerleading squad wants to answer. We have heard bold before, haven't we? The reaction online was telling. One commenter described the speech as calm, nuanced, and realistic. Another said it restored their confidence that someone was finally saying what needed to be said, but others were less convinced. Some described the proposals as authoritarian overreach. A few pointed to what they saw as an irony in Yusuf's positioning as a champion of Christian cultural heritage, and some took a more measured line, acknowledging that tighter controls might work in principle but questioning the detail of implementation. That last concern, frankly, is the least of my worries. My concern is whether any of it happens at all, because here is where I have to be straight with you. The timing of this speech is interesting. Reform has been watching the ground shift beneath them. Movements like Restore Britain have been making the argument quietly but persistently that the populist right has a pattern of producing big promises and modest results, that the cycle is always the same. Dramatic language, emotional rallies, soaring poll numbers, and then, once the cameras are off and the difficult compromises begin, a gradual drift back toward the establishment centre. In the view of many on the patriotic right, it amounts to conservatism with better branding. And before you dismiss that as cynicism, it is a fair question to ask, what structural guarantees exist that this time would be any different? Restore Britain's core argument, as I understand it, is this real change requires more than a polished policy document and a compelling speaker. It requires a movement grounded in principle rather than polling strategy. And looking at Yusuf's speech, well-crafted, media-savvy, carefully positioned, you can understand why some are asking whether this represents genuine conviction or a calculated response to a growing competitor. The British establishment has a long history of absorbing insurgent political energy and neutralising it. That is not an accusation directed at any individual. It is simply what history shows us. The Conservative Party had 14 years in government. On their own stated objectives around immigration, they fell significantly short of what they promised the British public. That is a matter of public record. Labour, barely a year in, have described Yusuf's proposals as divisive. On the doorsteps of towns across the Midlands and the North, that response sounds precisely like the kind of dismissive politics that has driven millions of voters away from the mainstream in the first place. So yes, the questions being raised are the right ones. But the right questions, delivered through the wrong vehicle, change nothing. Words at a podium in Dover mean very little if, 2 years into any future government, the boats are still arriving and the explanations have simply changed in tone. Watch what politicians do, not what they say. and stay alert to those who are building something on principle rather than momentum. Stay informed, stay engaged, and hold them all to account.